Let's make some Mokume Gane out of quarters. I based this video off of Tyrell Knifeworks' video of how to. I think he does 2 videos and he does a great job. We begin by putting acetone in a bowl and mixing it around with some quarters. The reason you do this, it not only cleans it, but it helps during your welding process to create a layer while it's heating up and burning off that prevents oxygen from getting in between these layers in that process, which will become more important during the forge weld itself. After these quarters are cleaned, put them in a row. I recommend angle iron because it balances the quarters the best. Now, out of these 2 clamps, the one that has almost an exact fit of a face was better because it didn't shift the quarters to one angle or another, and that becomes important during the weld. Each one of these quarter stacks were about 32 quarters. If you get them much longer than this, they seem a lot harder to balance both in your forge and also make it fit. In addition, it makes them harder to keep straight without bending or clamping when you're hammering down on them, and also in the weld. Now, when I tried welding at first, what I started doing was attempting to weld in the process of aluminum, because I thought, hey, this is not going to be the same as ferrous metals. Maybe the electrode won't pick up as well during the welding process. That didn't work. I had to keep going back to my machine and changing things, trying different amps, trying to connect my ground connection to different locations. And finally, I went to just the typical standard steel or stainless steel process. And I was also able to move my grounding clamp to the farther end of the table. Now, the amps that I end up using, I'll discuss, but I found that higher amps does work, so like 190 for me. Tyrell Knifeworks must have been using a different TIG welder because he used like 132 amps, and that seemed to work for him. So I would say don't get frustrated if some of these things aren't working for you. Keep changing things around until it starts to work. However, I will also say that during your process, if you are not able to increase your amps high enough because you're only running like a 110 volt TIG welder, this might not work for you. You just might not be able to have enough electrical power to heat these and weld these accurately and correctly. The other thing that I may have done differently than Tyrell was I ground my tungsten tip, a 3/32, to a more obtuse angle, so more of like a 35-degree angle than like a needle point. So some of these factors could have been different for Tyrell for those reasons. You'll see me struggle with my welding attachment here to the clamp face. It's important to watch your bubble. I understand that it's dark and lights, so you're fighting being able to even see if you're missing the quarter and going onto your clamp face. But you can really weld this onto your clamp face hard, so check after each string that you weld that you're not doing that. The next thing you need to make sure while you're welding is this is kind of dirty material, these quarters. So you'll get a lot of stuff flying back on your tungsten rod and into your cap. Make sure that you're cleaning some of that stuff out while you're going. In addition, I highly recommend making sure that while you're focusing on your bubbles in your welding line, that you make sure there's no infractions popping up like pinholes. Make sure they lap. When I originally got started, I tried to do this in TIG aluminum. This is a Miller-Matic 225. It's a multi-process welder, so it will do everything from stick welding to flux core MIG and TIG welding, stainless or aluminum. I originally tried this in the TIG aluminum, and I took it all the way up to a maximum thickness of 1/4 inch, and it was set for tungsten 332nd, which is what I was running. But I took it all the way up to the 1/4 thickness, which has a minimum range of 210 amps, and it did not work. So then what I did was I changed my process, and I took it down to the TIG stainless or TIG steel. And when I ran it at I did run it at 1/4 and at 190 amps. So that's what I did. TIG steel stainless process, 190 amps, And I ran my ground to my steel table clamp here and my welding process over there. So maybe the separation in ground distance was causing me issues at the amperage, but that's what I ran it at. Now keep in mind with this Miller multi-process welder, I am running a 220 plug, so don't think that you can run this at a 110 and have the same effects. Again, if you're running 110 and maybe that's what Tyrell Knifeworks was running, maybe the 132 amps that he recommends will work. Again, I don't know what welder he had, and I don't know which process he was running it in. This is just what worked for me. Now, when you're doing this, I highly recommend allowing your forge to heat up. So turn it on, let it run for a couple of minutes so it gets nice and hot. And the reason that you want that is both conduction and convection, almost like an oven, right? Like it's touching the ground floor of something that's hot and it's surrounded by hot walls. And that's better than just the flames coming in on direct heat that can burn it. You'll also see almost like a letter A or a TP formed metal object that I welded up so that it could keep the flames separately hitting almost on a reflective heat rather than a direct flame on heat. I start by setting my welds on both sides decently lightly, but still giving it some oomph with each hit. I don't want to hammer too much because I want to get this back in the fire and make sure that the welds are set. The only issue that I would say you're going to probably have is that your tongs, once you start hammering this down, are going to be too thick for the width of the material that you're hammering. So you'll watch me later in this move to just trying to hammer it on my anvil without anything holding it down. And that doesn't work very well, but it was kind of the only resource that I had. And once this is hot, you just have to move it. Also keep in mind that I'm doing 2 at a time. I'd probably recommend doing 1 stack at a time so you don't burn it. That happened in my other stack. It kind of melted in half. So turn down your forge. Once it gets hot, try and work this nice and slow. Watch your quarters in the forge. And they really sat in there for probably less than 5 minutes before I needed to go take a look at them. Now it's time to start grinding in some of these layered Damascus cuts. I used as thin of a cutting wheel as I could, and I tried to go in a little ways. I didn't try and go in too far because keep in mind I'm not using a forge press or my power hammer because this piece is so small I just can't hold it. So I'd recommend cutting in thinner, smaller lines. I think my Damascus lines showed up and it looked really good. I mean, that's up to you. You could honestly even cut in a waffle pattern and I think that would look good as well. After you have cut in the Damascus layered lines, you get it back in the forge. You heat it back up to heat. You should probably put some flux on there so you don't have more infractions. And then you are hammering the inside layers so they come front to the face. And the layers that you have left, basically the top of the grooves, get hammered down. And that's what shows up a lot of the layer pattern. Most people know this, but if you're fresh to Damascus, this is kind of the overall process. Again, this piece is so thin now that I just can't hold it with tongs and hammer on it. So maybe there's a good set of tongs you can even recommend for other people out there. Comment below. But I found this very difficult just in a process of keeping it on my anvil face. Sure, plenty of you are asking, why have you not just moved to the 72x72 grinder? Two reasons. One, that grinder's at my dad's shop up in Whitefish. And two, this Mokume Gane has a lot of scale and some gross stuff on the outside, and you're just going to find that you don't want to ruin your nice, expensive belts. Even if you have some old belts, it's hard to even hold on to this stuff, and I've seen people glue it to a piece of wood so they can put it into that 2x72 grinder easier. That's just fine. I just wanted to clean off the majority of the gunk on the outside before I took it to the finishing shop, so that's what I did. Hope this helped you. Here's the finished product. I'll see you in the next video.